beyond wonderful. And I would like to take some of that language to add to my bio, because you definitely spruced it up a lot more than what I gave you. So, thank you all for having me in CSI, for inviting me back again. I'm glad I wasn't booed last time. So my name is Lisa Ellis Gavin. You can call me Lisa, you can call me Professor Ellis, Professor Gavin. I will answer to any of those. But what I am here to kind of go over with you guys today is understanding licensure and certification, specifically in the state of New Jersey. So I do want to make that a point, because we are located in the state of New Jersey. This presentation is really geared specifically for that process. Should you think of licensure certification in another state, please refer to their licensing board or seek resources for that. But for this presentation is very specific for New Jersey. So just a quick overview of what we'll go over. As Stephanie kind of already mentioned, just an overview of our counseling programs, or what the Department of Counseling offers. I will then go over an overview of the application process in general, then specifically for the licensed associate counselor and licensed professional counselor, and then into the licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, or the CADC, continuing education, and miscellaneous. Oh, we're still on the first slide. Okay, why is that happening? One moment, please. Sorry, technical difficulties as oh, here we go. Sorry, now it's working. Okay, yay. All right. So like I was saying, I would go over both for the LCADC, the LAC, LPC. I'll just briefly discuss continuing education, since that is a part of your career development and being a counselor or a clinician in the field, and then miscellaneous topics as well. And obviously we'll save some time for questions at the end of the presentation. Here we go. Just again, as Stephanie mentioned before, we do have 4 master's programs in the Department of Counseling. We offer 4 concentrations: addiction, clinical mental health, school counseling, and student affairs higher education. We also have 4 certificate or certification programs, which I actually oversee. I should have mentioned that. And those are specifically the Advanced Counseling Certificate, the Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor Program, the School Counseling Certification Postmaster's Program, and the Student Assistant Coordinator Program. And the department also provides a PhD or a doctorate program in counselor education. So just an overview of some of the tracks or programs that we offer here. This presentation is really geared for our clinical mental health and substance use substance use folks, but I do just want to highlight the school counselors. The school counselors, at the end of your graduation, or at the end of your program, I'm sorry, you will file for graduation, and what this will do is it will audit or trigger the university to audit your transcripts to then send an endorsement for you to become a school or a credentialed school counselor. There will be an email outlining that whole process for you, and you will complete the online application for the Department of Education. Unfortunately, there's no physical certificate of the school counseling credential. That is very much held within the Department of Education, and something that is only accessible through an online portal. So just a highlight for the school counselors, in terms of our student affairs and higher education folks, unfortunately, there's no credentialing process or licensure process. And should you be in the current student affairs higher education program, there is no potential of going forth towards a clinical mental health license, even after you graduate. So if you have specific questions about that, I encourage you to reach out to your advisor in terms of if you're in that program and want to eventually become a licensed professional counselor. Student affairs might not offer that same pathway. So like I mentioned, we're going to go over the overview of the licensure process in the state of New Jersey. So the licensure process is held under the umbrella of the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs. So it houses all of professional licensure boards, and that really sets the regulations and statutes for the helping professions or various professions, right? A hairdresser has to go through these, a vet, physical therapist, a therapist, social workers, all of these folks eventually get licensed or credential through the Division of Consumer Affairs. And through all of these professions or careers have a designated committee. So when we think about counselors or even alcohol and drug counselors, we're actually committees under a board. So the State Board of Marriage and Family Therapy Examiners, and then we have the Professional Counselor Examiner Committee and the Alcohol and Drug Counselor Committee. So those are the two committees that we're going to be focusing on and who issue our licenses for both the LPC or the LCADC. So some general information about the application is you're going to submit them electronically. Do not send paper. It used to be paper, and you would have to print out this long, big packet and go to the post office and pay extra for stamp and then certified mail because you never want it to be lost. Thankfully, they created an online portal once COVID hit, and that has actually helped in terms of making sure that your application is completed correctly and getting it to the right hands. So they are submitted electronically. Do not send the paper application. It will land in the abyss of nowhere. And so you will go online, you will go on the Consumer Affairs Board, and you will create a username and a password, and that will stay attached to your license forever. And you will have 90 days to complete your application. If you, for folks that are like, oh, I'm going to graduate in May, I'll start my application. You could do that now, I guess, but if you were to have done that like last semester, it would have been abandoned. If you do not submit your full application before the 90 days expires, they delete it. And applications will always read pending until all documents are submitted and reviewed. In terms of when will they be reviewed, it can take up to 3 weeks or longer to hear back. Unfortunately, there are only a handful of people working and a lot of people trying to get licensed. So it is a waiting game sometimes, but at least a minimum of 3 weeks before you hear anything back. And then within all of these applications, be prepared to answer various types of questions. You're going to be asked about if you know, just your address, right? Your social security number. But if you have are engaging in any illegal activity, if you owe child support, if you have any cases against you, anything of that. So just be prepared and don't think, oh, why are they asking me this? They have to ask various questions about your studies, moral character, etc. Within the application. And the other thing that is consistent with all licenses is that there is a requirement of a background check. There is a New Jersey law that requires anyone who is working in the healthcare profession to undergo a criminal history and background check. So just to not be blindsided by that, you will have to actually also pay a fee for that, because why not? And go for fingerprinting, but that is part of the processing and something to just be prepared for as part of the process goes on. So just a quick overview of the licensed associate counselor. So this is considered a provisional license and the first step in obtaining your end license, LPC. And there's a link, but you guys can't see that. Anyway, so this is what your kind of what the paper format used to look like in terms of the application category. So initially, when you're applying to go to your LPC, you will actually apply for your LAC first. So part of the educational requirements is completing a 60 graduate credit program in counseling. And passing the NCE. So that's the first step, right? And thankfully, Montclair offers the ability for students to take the NCE prior to graduation so that you don't have to wait for that step when you apply for your LAC. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but I just wanted to highlight that. So when applying for your LAC, you must pass the National Counselor exam to be awarded your LAC. And so again, as I mentioned, you can take it prior to your graduation, and Dr. Schertz is in charge of that. And so keep an eye out in regards to the NCE examination and how that will be created for students who might be graduating. But if you do decide to wait and take the exam after you graduate, you will have to apply for approval via the committee. I do want to take a note for any folks that might be in the advanced cert program, which I might have talked to some of you already about this. Because you already have a master's degree and you are not a current master's student, you are not awarded that option or opportunity to take the exam. You would have to apply through the professional counselor committee for approval to sit for the exam. So current master's student only can take the NCE prior to graduation. Another thing that pops up in the application is this really crazy grid. It might not look like this online, but this is what it looked like on paper format and can be very overwhelming. And so part of what you have to do is the board or the committee requires that you list 45 credits, so 15 classes, that fulfill these 9 areas. And those areas of study being counseling theories, the helping relationship, human growth and development, lifestyle, group assessment, socio and cultural research, and the counseling profession. You will have to place one class in at least 8 of these 9 areas. Thankfully, which I thought was so convenient of the department to do, is a lot of our core courses, well, actually all of our core courses have the same language, right, as some of these areas. So you would take those core courses and put them in those areas of study. And then you would take an additional 6 classes, give or take, and add them to where you believe that they might be fulfilled in these areas. If you are confused, if you actually go onto the professional counselor committee website, they actually give you a breakdown of what each area might entail. So you can look at your course syllabus or learning objectives and go, hey, does this kind of fit here, right? And we wouldn't want to put like intro to substance use disorder or into the research and evaluation area of study. That just doesn't make sense. So you want to make sure you're putting your courses in the appropriate area. But again, you need 15 classes within those 9 areas, or at least at 8 of them. Please do not include more than 45 credits or the 15 classes. This is I've seen it happen where someone's like, I'm going to include 20 of the classes or 18 of my classes, and they actually didn't accept it and said, no, you have to resubmit it with only 15 classes. So just please be mindful of that. They're pretty rigid about how many classes they're accepting. So the other thing that happens with your LAC is you want to obtain a supervisor. In order to become a LPC, you need to complete supervision. So who is an approved or who can provide supervision while you're an LAC? So we have a few options. You would an LPC who has an ACS or is an approved clinical supervisor, an LPC who has completed 3 credit graduate level course in supervision, a PhD in counselor education, or a licensed clinical social worker who has completed a clinical supervision course. So you do have some variety, I guess, or options of who can supervise you for your LPC hours. But please make sure to, when you're searching for your supervisor, that you're looking for these credentials. Or that they hold the appropriate credentials in order to provide supervision. So with supervision, before you can start collecting your hours, you will submit a plan of supervision to the committee. You have to wait for the approval before you can start accruing your hours. And so again, in the plan of supervision, you will actually, your supervisor and you will go over all of the information, and they will also indicate, I am an LPC and I have an ACS, and submit the paperwork. You will also include a copy of your job description, your supervisor's resume, and that all gets sent to the committee for them to review and then approve. Once you get the approval, you can then begin accruing your hours. You will document, or at the end, the documentation of the supervised experience is submitted at the end, or if you have a change in your supervisor. The total amount of hours of supervision in order to obtain your LPC is 4,500 hours. It's a lot. However, your internship hours, so practicum internship 1, internship 2, can be applied towards those 4,500 hours. You can use up to, I believe it's 1,500 hours of your master's program internship. So most students are completing about 700, maybe a couple hours over. You will then obtain a letter verifying your completed 700 or so hours to submit to the professional counselor committee, so that you actually don't have to start at 0, but can start with, I can't do math, but less than 4,500 hours. So there is some room where you're not starting, oh my God, I have to complete 4,500 hours. It's a little less. The caveat with that is you don't want to put your practicum or internship classes as part of that grid that I mentioned before. So you will complete 4,500 hours. You are only able to count 1,500 hours per year. That equates to about 30 hours per week. You will not document in the same way that you are, or track your hours the same way that you might do as part of your internship class, but you do want to have some documentation so that you are showing your supervisor. But should you ever be audited, there is a tracking, you have evidence or proof that you've completed those hours. So again, you want to submit the plan of supervision, get the approval, start tracking your hours, and then once you complete all of your supervised hours, you would then submit the documentation of your experience. And so just a quick overview of applying for your LAC. You're going to enter the licensure portal, indicate you're applying for your LAC, submit your transcripts and verification of your master's degree, submit your NCE scores, pay all the fees, and then be awarded your LAC. So it seems like a lot. However, once you get the process and the ball rolling, it kind of works in steps pretty easily. And throughout the process, there are people available, be it not many, maybe 2 or 3, but they are really helpful and in answering questions and making sure that the process isn't as painful as some people make it out to be. So once you get your LPC, once you complete all of your 4,500 hours, you will then go back in to the portal and you will apply to become a licensed professional counselor. So this is often referred to as an end license, right? That's your end license. And so applying for your LPC is you're going to submit, just like we talked about earlier, the documentation of your completed supervised hours. Then it'll be an evaluation from your supervisor with that completion. So you will complete them. You will then enter the licensure portal, indicate that you're applying for your LPC, submit all appropriate supervision documentation, pay all the necessary fees, and be awarded the LPC. a lot quicker, right? We don't have to verify our transcripts. We don't have to resubmit the coursework, right? Because that was part of our LAC application. So a lot of that information is, they already know we met those standards. We're just updating to show that we're meeting the standards of the supervised experience. And so it is a quicker process compared to the LAC, just because there's not as much paperwork to go through. So the LPC, once you complete the supervision, the LPC is a quick update of your application, and then you're awarded your LPC. Again, as I mentioned before, it can take at minimum 3 weeks to be issued your LPC number. As frustrating as that is, that's probably a decent amount of time. And so I am going to cover the licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor credential. And this is something that our addiction and counseling folks can apply for. The addiction track meets both the LPC requirements and the LCADC requirements. And this is also for my folks that might be thinking, hey, I want to stay in the clinical mental health track, but I also want to enroll in the CADC program concurrently. You're welcome to do that. You can apply for your LCADC as well. So specifically, we fulfill the 270 educational hours that are needed. I can go into that in I think in a later slide, but just in terms of the process, it's a bit different and can be a bit backwards, I guess, compared to the LAC. So with the LCADC application, you actually submit a plan of supervision first, and that indicates to the alcohol and drug counselor committee that there's a file being open for you, and you are registered as what is known as an alcohol drug counselor intern. So if you're working at a substance use agency, whoever maybe your clinical director is or clinical supervisor, they're going to sit down with you and say, we need to open up a plan of supervision. It is a law or a regulation in the state of New Jersey that a state-funded agency have any counselors being under supervision and receive the supervision and education to become CADCs or LCADCs, and you have to have a plan of supervision if you are not licensed yet. So you will submit the plan of supervision, and then similarly, you cannot start accruing the hours until it's approved. And then as such, you will need to verify your supervisor and upload the signed plan of supervision, specifically under the upload licensing documents within the portal. And so who can supervise an LCADC? So someone who is a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, who is a certified clinical supervisor or CCS, or someone such as like an LPC or an LCSW who also has an LCADC and holds a supervision credential, so like an ACS or an NASW cert. And they must have at least 1 year post LCADC practice in order to be considered an approved supervisor. So again, 2 different options and a little more specific in who can supervise for LCADC hours. And so with the application, similarly to your LAC, you're going to submit the plan of supervision, you're going to accrue the hours, and then you're going to submit the completion of your supervised experience at the end, or if there is a change of supervisor to the committee. So very similar in terms of documentation of hours. The LCADC, you only need 3,000 hours, which equates to about 2 years of full-time work. Similarly, right, as the LPC, so 1,500 hours per year. And so it is a little less. But there is, again, similar to the LPC, they really love this grid. I don't know why. But you have to complete this grid and indicate at least 1 class in each areas of study. So you don't, it's not where you need to have the designated 45 credits. This in the LCADC, you only have to indicate 1 class per area of study. I don't know why it's different. it is, that's just the way it works. But again, areas of study, it just so happens that Montclair State and the department really like having the class titles match up those areas of study. So referring to that in order to fill out this grid. The other thing with the application for your LCADC is there's a little extra, I guess, where, right, you're completing the 3,000 hours of related work experience. Out of those 3,000 hours, 300 of those hours need to be in what's called the 12 core functions of a substance use counselor. And pretty much once you're in the field, you're doing this every day, but this is something that your supervisor would fill out and indicate that you've completed. And then on top of these supervised hours, you will also need to attend 30 self-help meetings. So those being 5 in AA, 5 in NA, 5 in Al-Anon, and then 15 in anything else. Any of the substance use classes, so conveniently sometimes require meeting attendance, you get to use those meetings towards those 30. So we're already helping you reach those 30 as part of your class assignments. So those are extra steps that might have to be taken for the LCADC application. As I mentioned earlier, in order to become an LCADC, you need to complete 270 educational hours that are specific in for substance use counseling. And so there's a picture here that seems like, what is all of this? And this is just saying that you've met the academic and professional training and that your courses are covering all of this work in these 5 domains. So what we do, and since you're in our program, is we are considered an approved provider, educational provider by the Addiction Professional Certification Board of New Jersey. So what that means is that we submit our plan, our education, they say, great, you meet our standards, and that when you go to apply for your LCADC, instead of handwriting or typing out now, any of these domains, you can email or call the department and request a letter from us verifying your coursework. And so that saves you a step, that saves everyone a step of having to write out every individual course and domain of where you received it and how many hours. Again, this is something that we offer and can be done once you go to apply for your LCADC. With the LCADC, so with the LAC, you have to take an exam before you're awarded your license and can start supervision. With the LCADC, you start supervision and then you take an exam. You complete the supervision and then you take an exam. So in order to obtain your LCADC, you are required to pass both a written and oral exam that's administered by the Addiction Professional Certification Board of New Jersey. Typically, you sit for the written exam first, and then once you pass that, you sit for the oral exam. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because it's covered in the slide, but what I will say is that if you are going for both your LPC and your LCADC and you obtain your LPC first, you are exempt from that exam. So my tip is don't be like me, save yourself time, money, and tears in not having to take 2 additional exams. So, but it is an option for folks that are like, no, I want to get my LCADC first. By all means, you will have to sit for a written exam first and then an oral exam. And so with similarly applying for your LCADC, you're going to complete the application. You'll complete the supervised hours and submit all appropriate supervision documentation, pass the exams, pay all necessary fees, and then be awarded your LCADC, right? Very simple steps, but they kind of can be confusing and feel like they take forever at times. So that's just a brief overview of the licensing process. And it is different for everyone, and everyone has a similar experience, but can run into bumps and stuff. And we try and streamline it or provide the education and oversight so that it isn't as confusing as it seems. Once you are awarded your license, you do as professionally have to engage in continuing education. This is just not just as a you want to, but ethically and morally, we should be continuing to keep up to date with trends, different theories, different approaches, the updated data, right? Whenever we graduate, it does not mean that the field stays that way. The field evolves, approaching techniques, interventions, and just our population and data evolves as well. So it's very important to continue educating yourself, right? Continuing education. And so with the LPC or LCADC, you will have to complete 40 continuing education units, and this is for every 2 years. Typically, we renew on even years, so we last renewed 2022, and so we're up for renewal in 2024. Similarly, with the LCADC, 40 CEUs, renewal every 2 years on the same schedule of even years. There is the difference of LPCs need to have 5 CEUs in ethics, 3 CEUs in social cultural information, and 1 CEU in opiate education. LCADCs, 3 need to be in social cultural, and 3 hours need to be in legal standards. As well as the LCADC requires 20 of those hours be in-person or synchronistic trainings, while the LPC can be completely asynchronistic or virtual. It doesn't have to be, they don't require that in person. So where can you get CEs or CEUs? A lot of times if you're working at an agency, they might have a training system. One big one that I know of is Relias, where you can get CEUs for free there and just do the trainings that way, and your employer might offer that for you. They offer probably continuing education days, and they might have conferences within or bring in trainers for your agency. Other places that you can probably look for CEs, ACA, the New Jersey Counselor Association, the National Addiction Professional Association, the New Jersey Addiction Professional Association, Marriage and Family Therapy, and the APA. But it is your responsibility to check and make sure that the CE that you are attending or the training that you are attending meets licensure requirements. So this is on you to just make sure that it's meeting MBCC standards as well as an approved provider. And that should be indicated, like meets continuing education for counselors or for LCADCs. There should be some language of that. So a couple questions that do come up. So say you are graduating this year and you're graduating in May and you apply for your LAC and you're awarded it in July and we actually renew in November. Do you have to complete 40 CEUs? No, you are actually given a buffer zone, really, that you don't need to complete the 40 hours in 3 months. You will just start your 40 hours starting the 2024 renewal cycle. If you're graduating in fall of 2024 and you're issued and you apply for your LAC and it's issued in 2025, you would be given some leeway and you would only need to complete the 20 CEUs for the following renewal cycle. I know that sounds really confusing, but I hope it makes sense. And so if you do complete more than 40 CEUs, you can actually carry 10 of those over. So for folks that might be, graduating in May and want to take continuing education before 2025, you can take 10 hours and carry that over to the next renewal cycle. It is really important to engage in continuing education. And is just, again, and part of professional growth, a necessity. And so just some miscellaneous things to kind of go over. Make sure you document everything, keep a copy of everything. Make sure that you are keeping track of your hours. Again, it doesn't have to be as detailed as we have you track it in your practicum and internship classes, but definitely make sure that you're taking note of how many clients you're seeing a week and tracking them. Make sure that you're keeping your profile and record up to date on the committee or on the website and your portal. So if you go through a name change, updating and notifying that. If you move, you need to update and notify and update your mailing address. Like I mentioned before, your practicum and internship hours can be used towards the 4,500 hours. You would just reach out to us when you go to apply for your LPC and ask for verification of your hours. If you're going to become dually licensed, make sure to obtain your LPC first, then apply for your LCADC. And most importantly, make sure you're familiarizing yourself with the laws, regulations, and statutes in New Jersey, right? I'm going over a brief overview, and it is your responsibility as practicing clinicians and counselors to also be up to date with the laws and regulations and statutes, right? They are accessible if you go on Consumer Affairs and then you go to either the Professional Counselor Committee or the Alcohol and Drug Counselor Committee. Their FAQs, they have the laws and statutes. Just read through some of them just to familiarize yourself in what does count, what can count. Can you practice across state lines? No, you can't yet. How much supervision can be done virtually? How many clients can you see? How many hours can you count? What's considered continuing education? Just familiarize yourself so that if you ever have questions, you know where to look. But most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions. The Consumer Affairs Board and these committees are here for us. So you should email them and ask questions, right? Ultimately, yes, they issue these things, but they are there to help support us throughout the process. I would also say it's very important to get connected with organizations that are there to advocate and support you, such as CSI, but also the New Jersey Counseling Association, the New Jersey Addiction Professional Association, as well as our national associations. They are here to help you, and so you can also lean on them to ask questions. So that's kind of a big pro tip, I guess, if you will, is don't be afraid to ask questions. And so, as I mentioned before, going over them, just a checklist, make sure for the LIC, you're completing the application, you submit your transcripts and resume, you include a 2x2 photo, you complete the background check and fingerprinting, you have the NCEs, and then you pay fees, right? So those are kind of just an overview of a checklist. For the LPC, a little bit shorter, you complete the application, you submit or update your application, submit the completion of supervision, submit updated 2x2 photos and pay fee. For the LCADC, the checklist is completing the application, having your transcripts sent and the educational hours verified, include your resume, the documentation of supervision and evaluation form, background check and fingerprinting, passing the oral and written exam, and paying the fees. And that's my presentation. Yay, we did it, everyone, with time to spare. So that's my references, as we should always include. But I know that there might be some questions, and here's my contact information. Should you want to reach out, by all means, email and phone or pop by my office. I'm in University Hall 2201. But I know that there might be some questions in the chat, and I'm happy to answer whatever ones might be popping up.
Thank you so much, Professor Gavin. Actually, we haven't seen any question pop in the chat this time. So for folks, we do have a few minutes just for a quick Q&A. If anybody wants to put any question in the chat really quick. But again, this is just like Professor Gavin said, is a very, very solid, comprehensive overview of stuff. Okay, we do have a question. So where can we get a letter for internship hours?
Yeah, okay. So when you're applying for your LPC, you will want to reach out to currently Professor Mangano, who will then audit, I guess, for lack of better words, your practicum and internship files, but it's also important for you to keep a copy of that as well. And what she will do is she will write a letter verifying the amount of hours that you've completed. So you guys keep track of your internship hours. So it's important to make sure you keep a copy of that too. So when you do go to her, you can say, I also, here's my last submitted log of hours. This was the total for my practicum, my internship 1 and internship 2. She adds it up, she writes the letter, and she will then email it to the appropriate email for the licensing board, as well as CC you on that email. So good question.
Another question we're getting is, where do you advise getting the background check? Do we submit the result ourselves?
Yeah, no, the board will do that for you. You don't even have to find where to go and get that. The board, the licensing board has their own processes, and that goes through, you know, like the New Jersey State, you know, whatever. And it's not something that you can do in advance. It's something that they have to, you consent for them to do the background check, and then they send it to their I don't know, place that they do it, and then they get the results directly. Yeah.
All right. And we have 2 more questions. And one is, for anyone going for both their LAC and LCADC, it's recommended to go for the LAC first. Should we also put in our supervision plan to the ADC to make sure that we meet requirements for both licenses? So I'm thinking what you're asking is, are you submitting?
Okay, so yes, so
Yeah.
I understand. Sorry. You will, if you are trying to get both licenses, you will have 2 different plans of supervision to 2 different committees, right? So you will submit a plan of supervision for your LPC and a plan of supervision for your LCADC. These hours can be done concurrently within some wiggle room. So you can be finished with your LCADC hours first and then your LPC, but I always recommend waiting and writing out the LPC hours to get your LPC first, to then finish out your LCADC and apply for that, so you bypass the exams. I hope that was helpful. I hope that made sense.
I do see folks have a little bit more, one question is a little bit more personalized. I would highly encourage you to reach out to Professor Gavin by her contact info. And another general question I would like to say is, can someone with their PsyD supervise the hours?
A PsyD?
The PsyD.
I do not believe so. Because it's a PsyD is a doctorate of psychology, and this is a counseling license. So it has to, it's a different process in how they conceptualize and work compared to an LPC. I hope that makes sense.
All right, because we have very limited time available, and also there is a class gonna use this room in about 10 minutes. So I appreciate everybody's great questions. So what we can do is we will take a note of those questions, and we'll share this with Professor Gavin, and we'll reach out to folks by email if possible. And also, I would highly encourage everybody to email Professor Gavin your questions as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so that you can have a little bit more time, right? And give us more context about what you're asking, right? So, and yeah, so I feel like as we draw near to the conclusion of the workshop, and I really appreciate that everybody's active participation, especially very good questions and paying attention, spending time with us today. And I'm for sure that the knowledge and strategies shared by Professor Gavin have undoubtedly enriched our understanding of the essential steps and considerations involved in pursuing certification and licenses within the counseling field. And her expertise, coupled with your engagement, and has made this workshop a very resounding success. And so as you continue on your professional journey, I would encourage you to apply those valuable insights gained today to navigate the certification and licensing processes effectively. And also remember, continuous learning and proactive engagement are key to achieving success in your continuing counseling careers. And on behalf of the Chi Sigma Mu chapter and Chi Sigma Mu IOTA International Honor Society, I would really extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Gavin. Everybody, if you can, please just shout out to Professor
Thank you
Gavin.
all for being here.
And to her exceptional guidance and expertise. And I also want to thank each of you for your dedication to enhancing your skills and knowledge in the counseling field. Before folks go, if you haven't shared with us your first name, last name, and email, you can just email me as a attendance confirmation. And we also do have more trainings and events coming up. So please mark your calendar. We do have a Narcan training session, which is also going to be led by Professor Gavin. And the date is going to be April 10th. And the time is 4:30 to 5:30. It's going to be in the ADP Center, room 1145. So it's going to be in person because it's more hands-on, right? The Narcan training.
Can I make a quick note about that? People who attend, we have Narcan kits. So that's important for your in-person attendance. I was able to secure Narcan kits to be given out during this training, which is super important. So even more of a reason to come. It's a Wednesday, April 10th, you said, at 4:30 down here in the ADP Center. A huge, very close to and dear to my heart in terms of training and harm reduction strategies, and counselors being educated and trained in such a life-saving measure. We know that overdose is not just for one group or set of people or population or environment, but that all of you, school, student affairs, clinical mental health, and addiction might experience someone having or experiencing an overdose, and being able to be equipped with the knowledge and training to be able to implement life-saving measures and have a Narcan kit. Why not? You get, like Oprah, you get a Narcan kit, you get a Narcan kit. So please come. I would love for everyone to be here. Sorry.
Yep. No, I can definitely see Professor Gavin's passion about this topic. And yes, please come. And no, that was great. And another event, well, not the event, but another big things happening is we are call for e-board nomination. So if you want to be part of our chapter, and which means you're going to join us and brainstorm about organizing workshops and continue supporting this community, our community at Montclair State, for all the counseling students here, please consider joining us. And the nominations are now open, and they have several positions, and it's in the email that was sent to you. And we have those leadership opportunities, and please consider nominating someone else, and not self-nomination for positions such as president-elect, treasurer, secretary, or student liaison. Okay. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email us at msu@cisigmamu@gmail.com. We're going to put our email in the chat. So I know it's a mouthful. So please take our email down. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. And for any questions about, licensing and certification and Narcan trainings, we're more than happy to receive email and communicate with Professor Gavin to give you a good answer as well. All right. And thank you again. Thank everybody for your continued support and involvement. And we, the CSI e-board, us, really wish you great success in your future endeavors. And we hope to see you in our future event really soon. Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, and thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.